Blood doesn't smell like copper. Not when there's this much of it. It smells like rust and regret. Lorenzo D'Angelo, the most feared man in Chicago, was bleeding out in a dirty alleyway behind a greased spoon diner, betrayed by his own brother. He had accepted death. He had closed his eyes, waiting for the cold. But instead of the reaper, he felt a tiny, warm hand on his cheek. He opened his eyes to see a 6-year-old girl in a ragged pink coat staring at him with wide, fearless eyes. She didn't scream at his mangled face. She just whispered the words that would burn down the entire underworld. "Don't cry, sir. My mom is going to save you." And that was the moment everything changed. Rain in Chicago had a way of washing away everything but the sins. On this Tuesday night, the downpour was torrential, hammering against the asphalt of 4th Street, drowning out the distant sirens. Lorenzo Enzo D'Angelo dragged his body another inch across the wet concrete. His breath came in ragged, wet hitches. The bullet in his side, a parting gift from a sniper rifle during what was supposed to be a peace summit, burned like a hot poker. But the bullet in his leg, that one had shattered bone. He was the capo of the D'Angelo crime family. He wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. He commanded an army of 300 soldiers, and now he was dying behind a dumpster that smelled of rotting onions and stale coffee grounds. Luca. The name tasted like Bull. His own lieutenant. His cousin. The ambush had been perfect. His driver was dead. His security detail was painted across the interior of the armored SUV a block away. Enzo had managed to crawl out and limp into the labyrinth of alleyways, losing the hit squad in the storm, but his luck had run dry. He slumped against the brick wall, his vision blurring. The neon sign of Miller's all-night diner buzzed above him, casting a flickering, sickly yellow light over his ruined Armani suit. "This is it," he rasped, his head falling back. He reached for the Beretta tucked in his waistband, but his fingers were too numb to grip the cold steel. He let his hand drop. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain, waiting for Luca's men to turn the corner and finish the job. Squish. 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 It wasn't the heavy boot steps of a hitman. It was the sound of small, light sneakers splashing in puddles. Enzo forced one eye open. Standing 3 feet away was a child. She couldn't have been more than 6. She wore a faded pink raincoat that was a size too big and held a clear plastic umbrella adorned with cartoon ducks. Her hair was a riot of blonde curls, damp from the humidity, and her eyes were a startling, piercing blue. She held a black trash bag in her other hand. She had clearly come out the back door of the diner to dump the trash. Enzo tried to growl to scare her away, to tell her to run before the wolves came. "Go," he wheezed. The girl didn't flinch. She dropped the trash bag. She took a step closer. "You're hurt," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was high, sweet, and completely out of place in the grime of the alley. "Kid, run." Enzo gritted out, blood coughing up onto his chin. She didn't run. She closed her umbrella and set it down. She walked right up to the most dangerous man in the city and knelt in the oily puddle beside him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled napkin. With a gentleness that made Enzo's chest ache, she reached out and dabbed at the blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. Enzo flinched. He expected pain. He expected fear. He didn't expect the warmth of her tiny hand resting on his cheek. "Don't cry, sir," she whispered, looking deep into his eyes. Enzo blinked. Was he crying? The rain masked it, but perhaps a tear of frustration had escaped. "My mom is going to save you," she stated with absolute conviction. "She fixes everything." "Daisy." The shout came from the metal door of the diner. It swung open with a clang, and a woman rushed out, a heavy apron tied around her waist. "Daisy, I told you to just throw the bag. And come right back inside, it's freeze." The woman froze. She saw the blood first, then the gun on the ground, then the man. Clara Mitchell was 26, but her eyes held the weariness of someone who had lived 3 lifetimes. She had messy brown hair tied up in a chaotic bun and a stain of ketchup on her collar. She stared at Enzo, and for a second Enzo saw the panic flare in her eyes. He knew that look. It was the look civilians gave him right before they screamed. "Daisy, get away from him." Clara hissed, her voice trembling but low. She lunged forward, grabbing the girl by the arm and pulling her back. "Mommy, he's boo-booed," Daisy said, pointing. "Like the stray cat. You have to fix him." Clara looked down at Enzo. The yellow light illuminated his face. Enzo saw the moment recognition hit her. It wasn't just, "Oh, a hurt man." It was, "I know who this is." Her face drained of color. She knew his face. Everyone in this neighborhood knew the D'Angelo face. It was usually plastered on the news next to words like racketeering or acquitted. "Mr. D'Angelo," she whispered the name, slipping out like a curse. Enzo coughed, gripping his side. "Help me, or walk away. But don't call the cops." If the cops came, Luca's men on the payroll would find him in the hospital and inject air into his IV before morning. Clara looked at the dark entrance of the alley. She looked at her daughter. She looked at the blood pooling around Enzo's leg. "If I leave you here, you're dead in 10 minutes, Clara said, her voice turning steel hard. She wasn't asking. She was assessing. 5, Enzo corrected. Clara swore under her breath. She looked around frantically. "Daisy, hold the door open, now!" "Mum, do it, baby. Go." Clara dropped to her knees. She wasn't a large woman, but she moved with a frantic strength. She grabbed Enzo's arm and slung it over her shoulder. "Up! You have to help me. I can't carry dead weight." "Why?" Enzo grunted, forcing his legs to work through the screaming agony. "Why help?" Clara gritted her teeth, heaving him upward. He smelled like expensive cologne and copper. "Because my daughter promised," she muttered, "and I don't make my daughter a liar." The kitchen of Miller's all-night diner was closed for the night, the only light coming from the street lamps filtering through the blinds. It smelled of bleach and old grease. Clara practically dragged Enzo through the back hallway, kicking the door shut behind them and locking 3 deadbolts. "Sit." "There," she ordered, shoving him toward a prep table. Enzo collapsed onto the stainless steel surface, groaning as his vision swam. "Whiskey," he demanded. "Or vodka, whatever you have." "I'm not a bartender. I'm a waitress," Clara snapped, but she ran to the front counter and came back with a bottle of cheap bourbon. She cracked the seal and handed it to him. Enzo took a long pull, the burn of the alcohol momentarily distracting him from the fire in his leg. He watched her through half-lidded eyes. She was moving fast, too fast for a waitress. She washed her hands in the sink, scrubbing them red with harsh soap. She ripped her apron off. Then she pulled a first aid kit from under the counter, but it wasn't a standard box of Band-Aids. It was a tackle box. She opened it. Sutures, scalpels, hemostats. Enzo's eyes narrowed. "You're not a waitress." Clara didn't look at him. She was snapping on a pair of latex gloves. "I am tonight. Daisy, go to the booth in the front and draw. Put your headphones on. Do not come back here until I say so." Daisy, who had been watching with wide eyes, nodded solemnly. She looked at Enzo. "Be brave, mister." Then she skipped away. "Who are you?" Enzo asked, his hand tightening on the bourbon bottle. "Shut up," Clara said. She took a pair of shears and cut open his pant leg. The fabric fell away, revealing the ugly, jagged wound in his thigh. She didn't flinch. She probed the wound with gloved fingers. Enzo roared, arching his back. "Stop moving or I'll nick the artery, and you'll bleed out on my clean floor," she said coldly. "The bullet is lodged against the femur. It didn't shatter the bone completely, but it cracked it. I have to take it out." "You're a doctor," Enzo realized. "I was a resident. A long time ago," Clara muttered. She poured bourbon directly into the wound. Enzo saw white. He bit his tongue so hard he tasted fresh blood. When his vision cleared, Clara was holding a scalpel. "This is going to hurt more than getting shot," she warned. "Bite on this." She shoved a rolled-up dish towel into his mouth. The next 10 minutes were a blur of agony that felt like hours. Enzo, a man who had been tortured by rival cartels and hadn't made a sound, found himself sweating through his clothes, gripping the edge of the steel table until the metal warped. He watched her work. She was precise, brutally efficient. There was no hesitation in her hands. She dug the bullet out with a sickening clink as she dropped it into a metal bowl. Then came the needle. 30 stitches, she said quietly, tying off the final knot. She cleaned the wound with iodine and wrapped it tightly in gauze. She stepped back, peeling off her bloody gloves and tossing them into the trash. She was breathing hard, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. Enzo spat the towel out. He was trembling, pale as a ghost, but alive. "You saved me," he rasped. "I patched you up," Clara corrected, turning her back to him to wash her hands again. "There's a difference. You need a hospital. You need antibiotics, blood transfusions." "No hospital," Enzo said. He tried to sit up, but the room spun. Where is my phone?" "It's smashed," Clara said. "It fell out of your pocket in the alley. I kicked it under the dumpster." "Why?" Clara turned around, drying her hands on a rag. Her eyes were dark. "Because phones have GPS. And if people are looking for you, Mr. D'Angelo, I don't want them coming to where my daughter sleeps." Enzo studied her. She was terrified. He could see the pulse jumping in her neck, but she was hiding it behind a wall of anger. "You know who I am. You know the bounty that's probably on my head by now. You could have called the cops and collected a reward, or called my enemies." "I don't deal with cops," Clara said sharply. "And I don't deal with scum like the people you work with." "Then why save me?" Clara walked over to him. She picked up the bottle of bourbon and took a swig herself, grimacing. "Because 12 years ago my brother got mixed up in your world. He was a driver. Someone left him bleeding in an alley just like you." Enzo went still. And nobody stopped," Clara said, her voice cracking slightly. "Nobody put a hand on his cheek. Nobody told him it would be okay. He died alone behind a warehouse." She slammed the bottle down. "I'm not saving you for you Enzo D'Angelo. I'm saving you because my daughter is 6 years old, and I need her to believe that when people are hurt, we help them. I need her to stay innocent a little bit longer." I'm not going to let her watch a man die tonight. Enzo looked toward the front of the diner, where the faint sound of cartoons could be heard from Daisy's tablet. He looked back at Clara. For the first time in his life, Enzo felt something other than lust or calculation when looking at a woman. He felt indebtedness and a strange, heavy curiosity. "What was his name?" Enzo asked softly. "Your brother." "Danny," she said. "Danny Mitchell." Enzo searched his memory. He remembered a Danny, a kid, a driver for the energetic crew in the South Side. Collateral damage in the 18 Turf War. "I remember him," Enzo lied. He didn't really, but he knew he had to say it. Clara stared at him, searching for the lie, but she was too exhausted to find it. "You can't stay here. The morning cook comes in at 5 a.m. That's in 4 hours. "I can't walk," Enzo said, "and I have nowhere to go. My organization is compromised. If I step onto the street, I'm dead." "Not my problem." "I'll pay you," Enzo said. $10 million. Clara laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I don't want your blood money." "Then I'll owe you," Enzo said. His voice dropped an octave, turning into the voice that commanded boardrooms and executions. "A life debt. From the capo of Chicago. You save me, you hide me until I heal, and I will grant you anything. Protection, a new life. Anything." Clara looked at the door where her daughter was. She looked at the blood on the floor. She knew she had already crossed the line. If his enemies found out, she had stitched him up. They would kill her and Daisy just for being witnesses. She was trapped. "My car is out back," she whispered, defeated. "It's a beat-up Honda. You're going to have to lie down in the trunk." Enzo smirked, though it looked more like a grimace of pain. "I've ridden in worse." "One rule," Clara said, pointing a finger at his chest. "You don't speak to my daughter about your work. You don't swear in front of her. And the second you can walk, you leave, and we never see you again." "Deal," Enzo said. But as Clara helped him off the table, his arm draped heavily around her shoulders. Enzo D'Angelo knew it was a lie. He was a man who took what he wanted, and he had a feeling that after this is over, he wouldn't be able to just walk away from the woman who sewed him back together and the little girl who wasn't afraid of the dark. The trunk of the 2008 Honda Civic smelled of motor oil and stale groceries. For Enzo D'Angelo, a man accustomed to the hand-stitched leather of a Maybach, the cramped darkness was a humiliation. But as the car rattled over potholes vibrating through his shattered leg, humiliation was the least of his worries. Every bump sent a shock wave of agony up his spine. The car finally stopped. The engine sputtered and died. The trunk popped open, letting in the cold, wet air of the Chicago night. Clara's face appeared framed by the sodium orange glow of a street lamp. She looked terrified, scanning the parking lot. "We're here," she whispered. "It's the 3rd floor. No elevator. Can you move?" Enzo gritted his teeth. "I'll make it." He rolled out of the trunk, his expensive suit now ruined beyond recognition. He leaned heavily on Clara. She was small, barely coming up to his shoulder, but she had a wiry, desperate strength. "Daisy, run ahead. Unlock the door." "Number 3B," Clara commanded softly. Daisy nodded, clutching her plastic duck umbrella like a shield, and scampered up the dimly lit concrete stairs. The ascent was a nightmare. Enzo dragged his bad leg, sweating through the fever that was already beginning to boil in his blood. Every step was a battle. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, Enzo's vision was tunneling. They tumbled into the apartment, and Clara quickly bolted the door, engaging the chain lock. "Bedroom," Clara panted, steering him down a short hallway. "Daisy, go sleep on the couch tonight, baby. Mr. Enzo needs the bed." "Okay, Mum," Daisy said, unbothered. They entered the bedroom. It wasn't the master suite Enzo was used to. It was a tiny room with peeling wallpaper, but it was aggressively cheerful. The bedspread was pink with unicorns. Glow-in-the-dark stars were stuck to the ceiling. A nightlight, shaped like a mushroom, cast a soft glow in the corner. "This is," Enzo muttered, swaying. "My room is too small for you and the mattress is broken," Clara said, helping him sit on the edge of the twin-sized bed. "Daisy gave up her castle for you. Don't make a mess of it." Enzo collapsed back onto the unicorn pillows. The juxtaposition was absurd. The capo of Chicago, a man who had ordered hits before breakfast, was now bleeding out in a 6-year-old sanctuary. "I need to check the dressing," Clara said, all business again. She turned on a bedside lamp. "And I need to get these wet clothes off you before you get pneumonia on top of sepsis." She worked quickly, stripping off his ruined jacket and shirt. When she saw the map of scars across his chest, old knife wounds, bullet grazes, burns, she paused. Her fingers hovered over a particularly jagged scar near his heart. "Occupational hazards," Enzo mumbled, his eyes half closed. "You have a terrible occupation," Clara murmured. She checked the leg. The sutures were holding, but the area was angry and red. She cleaned it again, her face tight with concentration. Enzo watched her. In the soft light stripped of the harsh diner fluorescence, she looked younger, but also more tired. There were dark circles under her hazel eyes that spoke of double shifts and unpaid bills. "Why do you live here?" Enzo asked. His voice was slurring slightly as the fever spiked. "You're a doctor." "I told you I dropped out," Clara said, pulling a quilt over him. "Residency doesn't pay well, and when Danny died, things fell apart. My parents got sick. The debt piled up. Then I had Daisy. Life happened, Mr. D'Angelo. Not everyone gets a golden parachute." "Enzo," he corrected. "Just Enzo." "Go to sleep, Enzo." She turned to leave, but he reached out, grabbing her wrist. His grip was weak, trembling. "My brother," he whispered, the delirium setting in. "Luca. He's the one who did this. If he finds out I'm alive, he'll burn this whole building down. You need a gun." Clara pulled her wrist away gently. "I don't allow guns in my house. I have a baseball bat and a deadbolt. That'll have to do." She turned off the lamp, plunging the room into the soft glow of the mushroom nightlight. Enzo closed his eyes. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, arranged in constellations that didn't exist. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't check the exits. He just let go. The fever dreams were vivid. Enzo was back in the warehouse. Luca was smiling, holding a glass of wine. "It's just business, cousin. You're too soft. You let people live. You have to be a wolf." Then the wine turned to blood, and the glass shattered. Enzo woke up with a gasp, his body drenched in cold sweat. Sunlight was streaming through the sheer pink curtains. For a moment he panicked, not knowing where he was. Then the smell of bacon and coffee hit him, grounding him in reality. He tried to sit up. His leg screamed in protest, feeling like it was encased in concrete. He fell back with a groan. "You're awake." A small face popped up over the edge of the bed. Daisy. She was wearing mismatched pajamas, a striped top and polka dot bottoms. She was holding a plate of slightly burnt toast. "Mum said not to wake you, but you were making noises," Daisy said matter-of-factly. "Like a bear." Enzo blinked, his throat dry as sandpaper. Water. Daisy scrambled away and returned with a plastic sippy cup shaped like a penguin. Here, it's the good cup. It doesn't spill. Enzo stared at the penguin. He took it, his large, tattooed hand engulfing the cup, and drank greedily. It was the best water he had ever tasted. "Where is your mother?" he rasped. "Work," Daisy said, climbing onto the foot of the bed and sitting cross-legged. "She has the lunch shift at the diner. Mrs. Gable from 4C is supposed to be watching me, but she falls asleep watching soap operas, so I came in here." Enzo's blood ran cold. "Your mother left you with me. She hid your shoes," Daisy whispered conspiratorially. "And she said if you try to leave, I should scream, 'Fire!' Plus you can't walk. Mom says you have a femur fracture." She sounded out the medical words carefully. Enzo looked around. His shoes were indeed gone. His gun was gone too. "Your mom is smart," Enzo muttered. "She's the boss," Daisy agreed. She took a bite of the burnt toast. "Are you a bad guy?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Enzo looked at the little girl. He could lie. He could tell her he was a businessman, a victim, a hero. But looking into those clear blue eyes, the lie died in his throat. "Sometimes," Enzo said honestly, "I do bad things, but I try to protect my family. Does that make me bad?" Daisy considered this, chewing thoughtfully. "Did you say sorry?" "Not yet." "You should say sorry. Then you're not bad anymore. That's the rule." Enzo let out a breath that was almost a laugh. If only the Mafia operated on Daisy's rules. I'll keep that in mind. Suddenly, the front door of the apartment rattled. Enzo froze. His instincts, honed by years of urban warfare, snapped into high gear. He ignored the pain in his leg and pushed himself up. "Daisy," he whispered urgently. "Is that Mrs. Gable?" Daisy looked at the bedroom door, confused. "Mrs. Gable knocks. She knocks like the police. Bang, bang, bang." This wasn't a knock. It was the sound of a lock being picked. Scratches, the tumble of pins. Enzo's heart hammered against his ribs. He was unarmed, crippled, trapped in a pink bedroom with a 6-year-old civilian. "Daisy," Enzo said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "Come here, now." Daisy sensed the shift in the air. She scrambled over the covers to him. "Under the bed," he commanded. "Way back, behind the boxes. Do not make a sound, no matter what you hear." "Do you understand? Is it the monsters?" she whispered, her lip trembling. "Yes, but I'm the monster eater. Go." She dove under the bed. Enzo grabbed the only weapon he could find, a heavy glass snow globe from the nightstand. He rolled off the bed, biting back a scream of agony as his broken leg hit the floor. He dragged himself behind the door, pressing his back against the wall, clutching the snow globe. The front door creaked open. Heavy footsteps, boots on cheap linoleum. "Hello?" A man's voice, rough. "Not Clara." Enzo stopped breathing. He counted the steps. 1 man. 2 places empty, a second voice said. "The waitress is at work. Check the rooms. The boss said he might have gone to ground in the neighborhood. We check every door." Luca's men. They were doing a sweep. They weren't specifically looking for Clara, but they were tossing every apartment within a 5-block radius of the ambush. The footsteps got closer to the bedroom. Enzo tightened his grip on the snow globe. He had 1 shot. He had to take the first one down, take his gun, and kill the second. In his condition, The odds were 0. But he looked at the bed skirt where Daisy was hiding. 0 isn't an option. The door handle turned. The door pushed inward. A massive figure in a leather jacket stepped into the pink room. He held a suppressed pistol. Enzo didn't hesitate. He swung the snow globe with every ounce of strength he had left. Crack! The heavy glass smashed into the man's temple. The man dropped like a stone, his gun clattering across the floor. Enzo lunged for the gun. But the second man was already in the doorway. He saw his partner fall. He raised his weapon. Enzo was on his knees, his fingers inches from the fallen gun. He looked up, staring down the barrel of a 9mm. This is it, he thought. I'm sorry, Clara. Hey! The shout came from the hallway behind the gunman. The gunman turned his head, distracted for a split second. Wham! A metal baseball bat swung through the air, connecting solidly with the back of the gunman's knees. He howled, buckling. Clara stood there, still wearing her diner uniform, her face a mask of pure feminine rage. She swung the bat again this time, bringing it down on the man's wrist. The gun flew out of his hand. "Get out of my house!" she screamed. The man panicked by the ambush, and the ferocious woman scrambled back, clutching his wrist. He looked at his unconscious partner, then at the gun on the floor that Enzo had now grabbed. Enzo leveled the pistol at the man's chest. His hand was shaking, but his eyes were dead. "Run," Enzo growled. "Tell Luca. Tell him the wolf is coming." The hitman didn't need to be told twice. He abandoned his partner and sprinted out of the apartment. Silence slammed back into the room. Enzo lowered the gun, his adrenaline crashing. He leaned his head back against the wall, panting. Clara dropped the bat. She rushed to the bed. "Daisy, Daisy." "I'm here, Mommy." Daisy crawled out from under the bed, dusty but unharmed. Clara scooped her up, burying her face in the girl's curls, sobbing dry, terrified tears. She held her daughter so tight, her knuckles turned white. After a long minute, Clara looked up at Enzo. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard realization. "They found us," she said. "They were sweeping the block," Enzo said, checking the pulse of the unconscious man on the floor. "He's out cold, but the other one, he'll be back, with 10 more. Enzo looked at Clara. "You have to leave. Pack a bag. Go to the police. Tell them I broke in and held you hostage. It's the only way you stay safe." Clara stood up, putting Daisy down. She walked over to Enzo. She looked at the blood seeping through his bandages again. She looked at the unconscious hitman in her daughter's bedroom. "No," Clara said. "Clara, don't be stupid. They will kill you." "They'll kill us anyway now," Clara said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We're witnesses. The police are on your cousin's payroll, aren't they?" Enzo nodded slowly. "Most of them." "Then we can't go to the cops, and we can't stay here." Clara went to her closet and pulled out a duffel bag. She began throwing clothes into it. "What are you doing?" Enzo asked. "I'm saving you," Clara said, throwing a pile of Daisy's socks into the bag. "Again. Get up, Enzo. We're going to my grandmother's cabin." "Your grandmother's cabin?" Enzo looked at her in disbelief. "I have millions of dollars in offshore accounts, safe houses in Zurich, and you want to take me to a cabin?" Clara turned to him, zipping the bag. "Do you have access to those accounts right now?" "No." "Can you walk to Zurich?" "No." "Then you're going to the cabin. It's in the woods, 4 hours north. No cell service, no neighbors, and plenty of guns. My grandma was a doomsday prepper." Enzo stared at her. This waitress who smelled like maple syrup and bleach had just taken out a hitman with a baseball bat and was now planning a tactical retreat. A slow, painful smile spread across Enzo's face. "Okay," he said. "To the cabin." The cabin was less of a rustic retreat and more of a fortress disguised as a shack. Located deep in the Wisconsin woodlands, miles from the nearest paved road, it was surrounded by towering pines that whispered in the wind. For 2 weeks, it became their world. Life in the cabin developed a strange domestic rhythm. Enzo, the man who used to decide the fate of businesses with a snap of his fingers, was now relegated to the couch, his leg propped up on a stack of old National Geographic magazines. Clara was his nurse, his guard, and his tormentor. "Eat it," Clara said, shoving a bowl of oatmeal toward him. "I hate oatmeal. It's peasant food," Enzo grumbled, though he took the bowl. "It's heart healthy, and since you've lost a pint of blood, you need the iron. Eat." She didn't fear him anymore. The fear had evaporated somewhere on the drive up, replaced by a pragmatic, almost bossy familiarity. She changed his bandages with efficient hands, scolded him when he tried to walk too soon, and ignored his demands for wine. But it was Daisy who truly disarmed him. Daisy didn't see a mafia boss. She saw a captive audience. "Mr. Enzo, look," she said one evening, holding up a drawing. It was a crude crayon depiction of a stick figure with a giant black beard. Enzo had grown scruffy, holding hands with a smaller stick figure. "Is that, me?" Enzo asked, pointing to the beard. "Yes, and that's me. We're fighting the dragon." She pointed to a green blob in the corner. "Who is the dragon?" "The bad men who came to the house." Enzo stared at the drawing. He felt a lump in his throat that had nothing to do with his injuries. He had spent his life building an empire of fear, believing that power was the only thing that mattered. Yet here he was, powerless, being protected by a woman and a child who had nothing. "It's a masterpiece," Enzo said softly. "I'll buy it from you. $5,000. Daisy giggled. "Silly. You don't have money. You can pay me in cookies." As the days turned into weeks, Enzo healed. The fever broke. The bone began to knit. He started doing push-ups on the floor, sweat dripping from his brow, driven by a singular purpose: revenge. But the target of his revenge was shifting. It wasn't just about reclaiming his territory anymore. It was about ensuring that the dragon never came near Daisy again. One night a storm rolled in, knocking out the power. The cabin was plunged into darkness. Rain hammered against the tin roof. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white bursts. Daisy was asleep in the back room. Enzo sat by the fireplace, feeding logs into the flames. Clara sat on the rug opposite him, nursing a mug of tea. The silence between them was heavy, charged with something unspoken. "You're leaving soon?" Clara said. It wasn't a question. "My leg can hold weight now," Enzo replied, not looking at her. "I made a call on the sat phone you found in the bunker. My loyalists are ready. They're waiting for my signal." "So you go back to war?" "I have to." "And what happens to us?" Clara asked, her voice quiet. Enzo looked at her. The firelight danced on her face, softening the worry lines. She was beautiful in a way that the polished plastic women of his world never were. She was real. She was tough. "I told you," Enzo said. "I'll set you up. Money. A house in France, anywhere you want." "I don't want your money, Enzo." "Then what do you want?" Clara stood up and walked over to him. She stopped inches from his chair. I want to know that this wasn't just a job, that we weren't just safe houses. Enzo reached out his hand, wrapping around her waist. He pulled her closer. He could smell the rain on her hair and the soap she used. Clara, he whispered, his voice rough. You saved my life. You are the only thing in this world that isn't tainted. He kissed her. It wasn't the aggressive, possessive kiss of a crime lord. It was desperate, tender, and terrified. It was the kiss of a man who had found salvation and knew he had to leave it behind. For that night, the war didn't exist. There was only the fire, the storm outside, and the woman who had stitched his heart back together. 3 days later, the peace was shattered. Enzo was outside testing his leg by chopping wood when he heard it. The distant hum of an engine. He dropped the axe. He limped to the edge of the tree line, peering down the dirt road. A black SUV was winding its way up the hill. It wasn't one of his. Clara, he roared, turning back to the cabin. Clara appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. What? Get Daisy, get in the cellar, now. He didn't have to explain. Clara saw the look on his face. The wolf was back. She grabbed Daisy, who was playing with pine cones on the porch, and ran inside. Enzo ran to the doomsday shed. He threw open the doors. Clara's grandmother had been paranoid, and for once Enzo thanked God for paranoia. He grabbed a hunting rifle and a box of ammo. He positioned himself behind the woodpile, using the logs as cover. The SUV crested the hill and stopped 50 yards away. The doors opened. 4 men stepped out. They wore tactical gear. Enzo recognized the man in the lead. It was the Butcher, Luca's top enforcer, a man known for using knives. Enzo! The Butcher shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. We know you're here. The waitress used her credit card at the gas station 3 towns over. Rookie mistake. Enzo cursed. He had told her to use cash. But it didn't matter now. Come out, cousin. The Butcher laughed. Luca sends his regards. He wants your head, but he said we can have some fun with the girl and the woman first. A cold, dark rage flooded Enzo's veins. It wasn't the hot anger of a fight. It was the absolute zero of a killer. Nobody touches them. Enzo racked the bolt of the rifle. Bang! The first shot took the driver in the shoulder, spinning him around. The woods erupted into chaos. The men scrambled for cover behind the SUV, returning fire. Bullets chewed up the woodpile, sending splinters flying into Enzo's face. Suppressing fire, the Butcher screamed. Move up, flank him. Enzo was pinned. He was outnumbered and outgunned. He had a bolt-action hunting rifle against automatic weapons. He fired again, missing as he ducked a hail of bullets. He checked his pocket. He had one trick left, the satellite phone. He pulled it out and hit the speed dial. Status, a voice crackled on the other end. It was Rocco, his second in command, the only man he trusted. I'm pinned. Blue Ridge cabin. 4 hostiles. I have civilians, Enzo shouted over the gunfire. ETA, 10 minutes, boss. The chopper is already in the air. 10 minutes. Enzo looked at the cabin behind him. Clara and Daisy were in the cellar, but the trap door was outside around the back. If the men flanked him, they would find it. He couldn't stay behind the woodpile. He had to draw them away. Enzo took a deep breath. He stood up, firing blindly to force them down, and then he ran. He ran away from the cabin, deeper into the woods, dragging his bad leg, ignoring the pain. He's running, the Butcher yelled. Get him! It worked. They took the bait. The gunfire followed him into the trees. Enzo moved like a ghost using the terrain. He had grown up hunting in the Apennines with his grandfather. These city hitmen were loud, clumsy. He circled back. He waited behind a massive oak tree. The first man ran past him. Enzo swung the rifle like a club, smashing the stock into the man's face. The man went down without a sound. Enzo took his submachine gun. Now the odds are even. He moved forward. He found the second man near the creek and dropped him with a double tap to the chest. Two left, the butcher and the driver. Enzo returned to the clearing near the cabin. He saw the butcher. He wasn't chasing Enzo. He was standing by the cellar doors. He was kicking at the lock. "Come out, little piggies," the butcher taunted. Enzo didn't shout. He didn't monologue. He raised the submachine gun. "Hey." The butcher turned. Enzo pulled the trigger. He didn't stop until the clip was empty. The butcher fell back against the cellar doors dead before he hit the ground. Silence returned to the woods. Enzo limped over to the cellar. He fell to his knees, his chest heaving. He knocked on the wood. "Clara, it's over." The doors pushed open. Clara peeked out, her face pale, holding a rusty wrench. When she saw Enzo covered in dirt and blood but alive, she dropped the wrench. She climbed out and threw her arms around his neck. Daisy followed, clinging to Enzo's leg. Enzo held them both. He looked up at the sky. In the distance, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a helicopter grew louder. His army had arrived. The king was back. But the king had changed. Chicago didn't know Enzo D'Angelo was back. The city thought he was rotting in a drainage pipe, and Luca the usurper king was counting on that silence. 3 days after the extraction from the woods, the rain had stopped, replaced by a humid, suffocating heat. The D'Angelo family estate, a sprawling mansion in Lake Forest, was lit up like a Christmas tree. Luca was hosting a reorganization dinner for the capos of the 5 families. It was a coronation disguised as a business meeting. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers glittered above tables laden with lobster truffle risotto and bottles of wine that cost more than Clara's annual salary. Luca sat at the head of the table wearing Enzo's favorite suit, laughing with the don of the Russian mob. "To new beginnings," Luca toasted, raising his glass. "And to the memory of my cousin, a great man, but too soft for this modern world." The room murmured agreement. They drank. Then the lights went out. A collective gasp went through the room. Bodyguards reached for their weapons, their laser sights cutting through the darkness. "Relax," Luca shouted, though his voice cracked. "It's just a fuse. Get the generator." Click. A single spotlight beamed down from the balcony above. It didn't hit Luca. It hit the double doors at the far end of the hall. The doors groaned open. Standing there, silhouetted against the night, was a figure leaning heavily on a black cane with a silver wolf's head handle. He was dressed in a suit blacker than a priest's cassock. His face was gaunt, bearded and scarred, but his eyes burned with the cold fire of the abyss. "Enzo," someone whispered. "It's a ghost," the Russian don muttered, crossing himself. Enzo limped forward. Tap, step, tap, step. The sound of the cane on the marble floor was the only noise in the room. "You're eating my food, Luca," Enzo said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the silent hall. "You're wearing my suit. You're sitting in my chair." Luca stood up, knocking his wine glass over. The red liquid stained the white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. "Kill him!" Luca screamed. "He's one man! Kill him!" 20 bodyguards raised their weapons. Enzo didn't flinch. He just checked his watch. "Now!" Glass shattered from the skylights above. Ropes dropped. Men in black tactical gear. Rocco's men rappelled down like spiders. At the same time, the waiters who had been serving the wine pulled suppressed pistols from their serving trays. In 3 seconds, the room was secured. Every bodyguard had a gun pressed to the back of their head. The waiters were Enzo's loyalists, planted hours ago. Enzo continued his slow walk toward the head of the table. The other dons remained seated terrified, knowing that if they moved, they died. Enzo reached Luca. Luca was trembling, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked at the cane. He looked at the scars on Enzo's face. "Cousin," Luca stammered, I did it for the family. You were weak. You were going to get us killed." "I was weak," Enzo agreed softly. He stopped right in front of Luca. "I thought mercy was a currency. I thought blood meant loyalty." Enzo raised his hand. Rocco stepped forward and handed him a pistol. It wasn't a gold-plated Desert Eagle. It was a simple, dirty Glock, the same gun the butcher had tried to use in the woods. But then, Enzo continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "A little girl told me something. She told me to say sorry when I do bad things." Enzo jammed the barrel of the gun into Luca's chest. "I'm sorry, Luca." Bang. The sound was deafening in the cavernous room. Luca slumped back into the chair, his eyes wide with shock before sliding to the floor. Enzo turned to the table of crime lords. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten them. He simply placed the gun on the table next to the spilled wine. "The D'Angelo family is under new management," Enzo said. "The old management. Anyone have an objection?" Silence. "Good," Enzo said. "Enjoy the risotto. It's excellent." He turned and walked away, the cane tapping a rhythm of absolute power. But as he exited the hall, leaving the violence behind him, Enzo didn't feel the rush of victory he used to crave. He felt empty. He had his crown back. But he was missing his heart. 2 months had passed. Clara Mitchell was wiping down table 4 at Miller's all-night diner. The fluorescent lights still hummed with that annoying buzz. The coffee still smelled burnt. The customers were still rude. Nothing had changed, and yet everything was different. She looked at the front door every time the bell chimed. She told herself she was afraid. She told herself she was looking for hit men, but she knew she was lying. She was looking for him. Enzo had kept his word. The day after the helicopter rescue, a lawyer had shown up at her apartment. He had handed her the deed to a house in the suburbs, a trust fund for Daisy's college, and a check for $5 million. Clara had torn the check up. She had sent the lawyer away. She didn't want to be paid off like a mistress. She had saved his life. She had washed his blood off her floor. They had shared a silence in a cabin that felt more intimate than any marriage she had ever known. And then he had vanished. "Mummy, draw with me," Daisy said from the booth near the window. Clara sighed, forcing a smile. "In a minute, baby." The bell above the door chimed. Clara didn't look up immediately. "Sit anywhere you like. I'll be right with." The air in the diner changed. It grew heavier, charged with static. The chatter of the truckers at the counter died down. Clara froze. She knew that cologne. Sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and rain. She looked up. Enzo stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing dark jeans and a leather jacket. He was walking without the cane now, though a slight limp remained a permanent reminder of the alley. He looked out of place among the vinyl seats and ketchup bottles. He looked like a wolf who had wandered into a petting zoo. He walked straight to her. He didn't look at the customers. He didn't look at the cook. He only looked at her. "You tore up the check," Enzo said. "No hello. No small talk." "I don't want your money," Clara said, gripping her rag tightly. "I told you that in the kitchen while I was sewing your leg shut." "I bought the building," Enzo said. Clara blinked. "What? The diner? The apartment complex? The block? I bought it all this morning." Enzo took a step closer, invading her personal space, radiating that intense heat she remembered from the cabin. "So technically I'm your landlord and your boss. You can't just buy people's lives," Clara hissed, her eyes flashing. "Why are you here, Enzo? You have your kingdom back. Go rule it." "I tried," Enzo said. His voice was raw. He reached out and took the rag from her hand, tossing it onto the table. He took her hands in his. They were rough, calloused hands, holding hers with a terrifying gentleness. "I sat in my mansion," Enzo said. "I had everything. Power, fear, respect. And all I could think about was burnt toast and a pink bedroom." Clara's breath hitched. "Enzo." "You were right," he said. "I am a bad man. I have done terrible things and I can't undo them. But I don't want to be the monster anymore. I want to be the man you saw in the woods." "And what about the danger?" Clara asked, tears pricking her eyes. "What about the next Luca?" "There is no next Luca," Enzo said darkly. "I made sure of that. I am the most powerful man in this city, Clara. And I will burn this city to ash before I let anyone touch a hair on your head." "Mr. Enzo." Daisy had spotted him. She slid out of the booth and ran full tilt down the aisle. Enzo released Clara's hands and dropped to one knee, ignoring the pain in his bad leg. He opened his arms just in time for Daisy to slam into him. "You came back!" Daisy squealed. "Did you slay the dragon?" Enzo hugged the little girl, burying his face in her neck. He looked up at Clara over Daisy's shoulder. His eyes were shining. "Yes, Piccola," Enzo whispered. "The dragon is gone." He stood up, lifting Daisy with him. He looked at Clara. "I don't want you to be my nurse," Enzo said. "And I don't want you to be my employee. I want you to be my conscience. I want you to be the one who tells me when to stop." Clara looked at the man who had bled on her floor. She saw the darkness in him, yes, but she also saw the desperate need for light. She saw the man who had played dolls with her daughter while hiding from a death squad. "I'm not moving to a mansion," Clara said stubbornly. "I like my neighborhood." Enzo smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen on him since the cabin. "Then we'll stay here. I'll renovate. I'll make the walls bulletproof. I don't care where we are, Clara, as long as I'm with you." He held out his hand to her. Clara looked at the hand. It was a dangerous hand. Taking it meant stepping into a world of shadows and risk. But letting it go meant living the rest of her life, wondering what if. She took his hand. "Okay," Clara whispered, "but you're doing the dishes tonight." Enzo D'Angelo, the capo of Chicago, the wolf of State Street, laughed. He pulled Clara into a kiss that silenced the entire diner, a kiss that tasted of second chances and dangerous promises. "Deal," he said against her lips. As they walked out of the diner together, Enzo carrying Daisy and holding Clara's hand, the rain began to fall again. But this time, it didn't smell like rust and regret. It smelled like a clean slate. And in the reflection of the window, the neon sign buzzed no longer just a flicker in the dark, but a beacon. The wolf had found his pack, and God help anyone who tried to hurt them now. And that is the story of how a single act of kindness brought the most dangerous man in Chicago to his knees. It proves that sometimes strength isn't about how hard you can hit or how many men you command. Sometimes real strength is a little girl in a pink coat telling you not to cry. Enzo found his salvation not in power, but in the love of a waitress who refused to be afraid. If you enjoyed this story of danger, redemption, and romance, please smash that like button. It helps the channel so much. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, if you were Clara, would you have saved Enzo or would you have walked away? I read every comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.